What is up? Welcome to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and this is our last show before we hit the holiday break, which I'm looking forward to. I'm sure you guys are looking forward to it as well. We will not have a show tomorrow, which is Thanksgiving Day, or the day after that, but it'll give you guys a lot of time to catch up on our archives of commentary and news stories. So definitely catch up with things that you might have missed. Later in the second hour, we're going to be joined by John Idarola. We're lightening it up in the second hour today. But I got to be honest, after a pretty long streak of nothing but bad news, looks like we've got a pretty giant good news story to share with you today. And many of you have probably heard about it already. But nonetheless, let's get to it now. So the three men involved in the fatal shooting of Ahmaud Arbery in the Deep South, in Georgia to be exact, have been found guilty of murder. This is a big deal, especially just following the verdict in regard to the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. Many people had absolutely no idea which way the jury would, decide this case, especially when you consider the very clear racial makeup of the jurors. But none of that really mattered at the end of the day. It's clear that they took the, instructions and the evidence seriously and came up with these decisions. Now, just to give you an idea of the rulings, we have Travis McMichael, who was found guilty of malice murder, 4 counts of felony murder, 2 counts of aggravated assault, false imprisonment, and criminal attempt to commit a felony. Greg McMichael, the father of Travis McMichael, was also found guilty of murder, but he was found not guilty of malice murder. And their neighbor, William Bryan, was also found guilty of malice murder, 1 count of felony murder, and 1 count of aggravated assault. So all 3 of them were found guilty of murder. Keep in mind that each of them had multiple murder charges. And of the 3 of them, Travis McMichael is the one who not only shot the gun, but was found guilty of all the charges that he was attempting to defend himself against. Now, Greg McMichael, his son, Travis McMichael, and their neighbor, William Rody Bryan, were charged with murder, aggravated assault, false imprisonment, and also attempt to falsely imprison. So that's a summary, but I wanted to really break it down earlier for you guys so you could see that, the jurors really did look at each separate charge, and they made decisions based on what those charges entailed. They also asked for evidence, to review evidence during their deliberations, including the video of Ahmaud Arbery getting shot by Travis McMichael. Remember, that video was leaked, and I have a feeling that, there was this assumption by the now convicted felons, but at that time suspects, that the video would somehow exonerate them, but that was not the case. The panel deliberated for more than 6 hours on Tuesday before returning Wednesday morning. Less than an hour later, they asked to review the cell phone video at the heart of the case. And just to remind you all of what that video looked like, we're going to toss to it now. Keep in mind that they had an enhanced version of it as well. Let's watch. Police report following the shooting. And by the way, keep in mind that initially there was no intention in prosecuting these individuals. They weren't even arrested until 74 days after Ahmaud Arbery was shot and killed. So, I mean, it is incredible that there's justice. His family, Ahmaud Arbery's family, has referred to this as an anomaly, to give you a sense of just how unexpected it is these days to get justice when these types of cases arise. But going back to that video and the contradictions that the McMichaels had made, they had claimed that they drove alongside Ahmaud Arbery and asked him questions because they saw him going into a construction site, a home that was under construction. They claimed that there had been a string of burglaries in the area, and they felt that he was suspicious. So they told the police that they just drove alongside Ahmaud Arbery to ask some questions, and that's when things got violent. But as you can see from that video, they clearly boxed him in. They tried to trap him on the road. And then, you have, the father, Greg McMichael, with a handgun as he's standing in the bed of the pickup truck. You have Travis McMichael with the shotgun. Ahmaud Arbery had done nothing wrong. There was no evidence that he had committed a crime. So he had been confronted by two men who were blocking him on the road and are armed. And so, the argument from the McMichaels was, well, we were just trying to do a citizen's arrest. And then all of a sudden we were attacked by Ahmaud Arbery. He tried to reach for my gun. That's what Travis McMichael said. And so he tried to use a self-defense argument in regard to his decision to shoot and kill Ahmaud Arbery. And the jurors clearly did not buy that self-defense argument. And by the way, going back to the prosecution, I think that the prosecutors did an excellent job in this case because not only were they able to point to all the lies or inconsistencies in the defense side, but they were able to present evidence that really showed that Ahmaud Arbery wasn't really doing anything wrong and that he was being pursued by these individuals who just thought he was suspicious. The jurors also wanted to listen to the 911 call, the call that the McMichaels made to the police after during this incident. So while Ahmaud Arbery was still alive. And it's interesting that juries wanted to hear that and how Greg McMichael had described Ahmaud Arbery in that call. Now, in regard to the string of burglaries, right, the whole excuse that the McMichaels had for pursuing him in the first place, I've shared all of this with you before, but let me repeat again. There was only one burglary, an automobile burglary, that was reported to county police in the Satilla Shores neighborhood between January 1st and February 23rd, according to documents obtained by the Brunswick News. And by the way, that's also data from the Glynn County Police Department. It involved a Smith & Wesson M&P 9mm pistol stolen January 1st from a pickup truck outside of Travis McMichael's home. Gregory McMichael moved the 2011 Ford F-150 from one spot to another in front of the home at around 9:30 a.m. January 1st, forgetting to lock it afterwards, Travis McMichael told police. And then about an hour later, Travis McMichael found the handgun's empty holster on the unlocked truck seat, the report said. I give you that information because, number one, there was not a string of burglaries. Number two, the only people who had been burglarized at that time were the McMichaels, who didn't even have the common sense to lock their vehicle as there was a gun in that vehicle. So I think that piece of information is incredibly important, and I'm sure that the jurors considered that as well. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about how Travis McMichael really had a damning moment on the stand as the prosecutor was engaging in cross-examination, because in order to claim that you shot and killed someone in self-defense, the individual that you shot and killed, in this case Ahmaud Arbery, would have to pose an imminent threat. And based on what you're about to hear, and based on the fantastic line of questioning by the prosecutor, that just wasn't the case. Let's watch.
And at this point in time, when you first see him on Burford, he's not reaching into his pockets.
No, ma'am. Not running, no, ma'am.
No. And he never yelled at you guys?
No, ma'am.
Never threatened you at all?
No, ma'am.
Never brandished any weapons?
Sorry, Your Honor, he's trying to finish his answer.
Yeah, he did not threaten me verbally. No, ma'am.
All right. Didn't brandish any weapons?
No, ma'am.
Didn't pull out any guns?
No, ma'am.
Didn't pull out any knife?
No, ma'am.
Never reached for anything, did he?
No.
He just ran?
Yes, he was just running.
I mean, come on. How are you going to claim self-defense? I mean, the last statement there was that he was just running. someone's running away from you, they clearly don't pose an imminent threat. And so the jury did not buy the defense's argument here. And look, the defense certainly was flailing. The facts were not on their side. And I think in a moment of desperation, we had what I would argue is one of the worst moments in the trial for everyone. I mean, it was insulting for the victim's family here, Ahmaud Arbery's family, and incredibly embarrassing for the defense. Here's that moment that I'm talking about. This is defense attorney Laura Hogue making one of the most disgusting statements I've heard in a court.
Turning Ahmaud Arbery into a victim after the choices that he made does not reflect the reality of what brought Ahmaud Arbery to Satilla Shores in his khaki shorts with no socks to cover his long, dirty toenails.
That is the sign of an incredibly desperate defense attorney who is now relying on making statements meant to dehumanize the victim in the case. I think it was the last-ditch effort. Clearly, it failed. I'm happy to see it fail. I'm happy to see the verdict come down the way that it did, especially the day before Thanksgiving. You know, it's still such a tragic story considering the fact that, you know, Ahmaud Arbery died while doing absolutely nothing wrong, while jogging. His family is going to have to suffer with that for forever. And it's still a tragic story. But it's nice to see justice served, especially considering how close the McMichaels and, their neighbor got to basically get away with this, to not have to suffer any consequences for what they had done. Again, not a single person involved was arrested until 74 days after the shooting. And it was because of the nationwide attention on, race relations in this country following the murder of George Floyd, that this situation, which, by the way, happened prior to the murder of George Floyd, just came back up. People were outraged that there wasn't justice. People were outraged that the McMichaels hadn't been arrested. And so because of all of that attention, we finally were able to get prosecutors to look at that case seriously and file charges against the McMichaels and their neighbor. So that's the story. I'm really happy to see that all three were found guilty of murder. And I'm happy to see justice served in this case. The defendants are planning to appeal the decision. We'll see how that goes, but my guess is it's not going to bode well for them. So there you have it. There's the end to the Ahmaud Arbery trial, the trial involving the three men who murdered Ahmaud Arbery. And yeah, it's again, nice to have a little bit of justice. All right, let's move on to something completely different. I wanted to move to some political news today because I've noticed that a lot of people have been paying attention to what the Bidens are up to during the holiday break. But there are some details we really need to dig into, okay? This is the kind of story I love because we need to connect dots that aren't being connected in the press right now. So, man of the people, Joe Biden, will be vacationing for the Thanksgiving holiday in Nantucket, which is fine. Nothing wrong with Nantucket. You know, you want to go chill in Nantucket. I'm not hating. However, I might hate on you a little bit if you're hanging out in the home of private equity billionaire David Rubenstein. Now, the president and First Lady Jill Biden touched down in Nantucket Tuesday night to spend the holiday week with extended family, planning to stay at the home of their friend, David Rubenstein, as they have done, the White House told reporters. And they've apparently done this. They've gone to Nantucket every year in a row for a very long period of time. Who knows? I don't care about that. What I do care about, again, is the fact that they're chilling in Rubenstein's home. So what's wrong with Rubenstein? Well, he's the co-founder and also co-CEO of just this small private equity firm called the Carlyle Group, which has a long, shady history. I'm sure we'll be getting into more details about that history later in the show. But I do want to talk a little bit about how the press seems to think it might be a little bit problematic, but they don't really know how to frame their question. Case in point, we have Peter Doocy asking White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki about Biden's decision to stay in a private equity billionaire's home in Nantucket during the break. Let's watch.
What message does it send to the middle-class Americans President Biden says that he's trying to help, who are struggling this week to cover the cost of the most expensive Thanksgiving ever, that the president is going to take a few days off at a billionaire's compound in Nantucket?
Well, first I would say, I don't know if you've cooked a turkey before, but a 20-pound turkey is a pretty big turkey. I think we can all agree. They're about $1 more. So not to minimize that, any increase in prices is something the president is concerned about, as is evidenced by his announcement today and as his efforts to push forward on additional relief for the American people. But I just want to be clear that there are abundance of turkeys available. They're about $1 more for a 20-pound bird, which is a huge bird if you're feeding a very big family. And that's something that, again, we've been working to make sure people have more money in their pockets to address it as the economy is turning back on.
Now, a far better way of asking that question, because let's keep it real, right? The right wing, reporters like Peter Doocy are trying to pretend as if they're concerned about the economic anxieties that Americans are facing today. I don't buy that for 1 second. And I think that the lack of sincerity in those very issues leads to Doocy asking the question or framing the question in such a terrible way. What I mean by terrible is, no, why don't you ask why it is that Joe Biden, a Democratic president, thinks it's a good idea to vacation in the home of a private equity billionaire who, by the way, co-founded the Carlyle Group alongside Glenn Youngkin, who just beat, the Democratic incumbent in the gubernatorial race for Virginia. Terry McAuliffe, the Democrat, lost to Glenn Youngkin. One of the things that Democrats are supposed to dislike about Youngkin, other than the fact that he's a political opponent, is that he's a private equity guy. And private equity guys, not good, bad, right? Now, private equity guys are not good. They are bad. And I'll explain why in just a second. But it just based on optics alone, it's not a good look, right? But then you also have to keep in mind that this sends the message that I think a lot of American voters are kind of privy to at this point, that when it comes to a lot of the bread and butter issues, when it comes to the substantive political ideology that impacts our everyday lives, there's a lot of agreement between Democrats and Republicans. So without further ado, let's talk a little bit about the Carlyle Group, and more importantly, another decision made by the Biden administration just recently that I think needs to tie into this story. So Carlyle specialized in buying and selling businesses that relied on government spending, and it hired former government officials to help it. Carlyle partners included James Baker III, a former Treasury Secretary, Peter Carlucci, a former Defense Secretary. Also, don't forget about former President George H.W. Bush, who was once an advisor to the firm. Now, just this week, Biden made the decision to reappoint Jerome Powell as the Federal Reserve's chair. Now, Jerome Powell was appointed by Donald Trump. And it's a little curious, right, that Biden has decided, just reappoint the guy. Now, Jerome Powell has been a little disastrous, especially considering the monetary policy coming out of the Federal Reserve, both before the pandemic and then how it basically went into overdrive during the pandemic. We've talked about, quantitative easing on this show before. I'll get back into it again. But in terms of inflation, the Federal Reserve has had a big role in creating inflation in certain sectors of the economy, especially when we're talking about the housing market, because these private equity firms, right? Private equity firms like BlackRock, for instance, will get this access to cheap money from the Federal Reserve, and they invest it in residential real estate, which they then turn into rentals, right? Thus, taking the limited supply of housing out of the market, keeping it for themselves, hoarding this real estate for themselves in order to corner the rental market. We've seen that with BlackRock, and we see it with Carlyle Group as well. And so, on one hand, you see the administration get hit hard by fears of inflation. On the other hand, what Biden just did in reappointing Fed Chair Jerome Powell, it just exacerbates the inflation that we're already experiencing, which is obviously going to hurt him politically even further, because Democrats don't know what they're doing, right? They're so blinded by their own cozy ties to Wall Street that they honestly hurt themselves politically, both when it comes to optics and when it comes to how these cozy ties lead to policies that actually hurt their own base. So with that said, let's talk a little more about Jerome Powell's role in the Federal Reserve and his close ties to the Carlyle Group, right? Because this is very much a relationship of give and take. Carlyle Group loves Jerome Powell loves Carlyle Group. He actually used to work for them. So in the early 2000s, Powell was a partner at the Carlyle Group, a private equity firm that specialized in hiring former government officials and cashing in on their connections. At Carlyle, Powell learned firsthand about debt-driven business models of private equity business, which delivered hundreds of millions of dollars of profit to senior partners while saddling the companies they bought and sold with debt and downsizing. I mean, we've seen this happen with companies like Toys R Us, for instance. Toys R Us is doing pretty well, but a private equity firm comes in, saddles the company with so much debt, it becomes untenable. And before you know it, Toys R Us is gone. It goes bankrupt. A lot of activity from private equity firms usually involves that kind of business tactic. Now, Jerome Powell, is also a disaster because he's in charge of continuing the monetary policy, again, that has led to inflation in certain sectors of our economy. Between 2008 and 2014, the Federal Reserve created roughly 3 times as much money as it had created between 1913 and 2007. In other words, it crammed about 300 years worth of money growth into a few short years. And then when COVID hit in 2020, the Fed printed about another 300 more years worth of money in a period of months, some $3 trillion. So the idea here is, oh my God, we're experiencing an economic downturn. We need to help the banks. We need to help these private equity firms, because if we provide capital, if we provide liquidity, they're then going to engage in trickle-down economics and they're going to save the economy. But it doesn't quite work that way. So the Fed doesn't create dollars in the bank accounts of ordinary Americans, as was reported in Fortune. Rather, it can only create dollars inside the bank vaults of 24 elite institutions on Wall Street called primary dealers, which include banks like JP Morgan and Citigroup. When the Fed prints money, it essentially engages in an extreme form of trickle-down economics, a failed model, of course, by giving new cash to the biggest banks in America in hopes that they will eventually create jobs and boost wages. Now, that doesn't typically work out the way that we hope it does, or work out the way that the Federal Reserve would have you believe. Because they take that money, they take the cheap money from the Fed, and they make investments on their behalf. They buy real estate, right? Gobbling up the limited inventory of homes on the market, homes that typically would be bought by a couple looking to start a family, for instance. They do corporate stock buybacks. That's another example of themselves, like, using an economic crisis and the monetary policy from the Federal Reserve to further enrich themselves, to artificially inflate the value of their shares, right? And then you go to, Biden reappointing Jerome Powell when his monetary policy has been pretty disastrous in regard to inflation. And then all of a sudden you notice, oh, well, Powell's got ties to the Carlyle Group. Biden's hanging out in the home of the Carlyle Group co-founder. It's a small club, but they're all talking, and I feel like they're all working together. So many years of easy money policies by the Federal Reserve have been rocket fuel for private equity firms like the Carlyle Group, because cheap debt is their lifeblood. It funds their ambitious takeover plans and even funds their paychecks directly. So everything is connected, everything is tied. The Biden administration, Biden specifically, has gotten a lot of heat for reappointing Jerome Powell as the chair of the Federal Reserve. That just happened recently. He's getting heat for that. So I don't know. I would argue that a savvy president who might be a little concerned about optics wouldn't go hang out in the home of the, Carlyle, co-founder, co-CEO, knowing full well that that individual had and has a working relationship with the very person that you just reappointed. They love the cheap money. They love the Fed's monetary policy, even though it has negative impacts on our economy. And it's just, it all makes sense when you look at it. At the end of the day, it's just this club where decisions are not made on behalf of what's best for the American people. It's all about self-dealing. Carlyle Group loves Jerome Powell. They know Jerome Powell. Really, like, they've worked with Jerome Powell. They know what kind of monetary policy Jerome Powell will continue, the quantitative easing, which private equity firms like Carlyle Group will take full advantage of to enrich themselves. So that's what the question Peter Doocy was asking should have really gotten to. That's what the framing should have been about. The corruption, the close ties between our government and the banking industry, our government and Wall Street firms. That's the real issue here. But the problem is when you're a faux populist and you don't actually care about the ordinary American getting screwed over, you're not going to quite frame your question in a way that isn't so friendly to private equity or to Wall Street. So there you have it. There I am unpacking what's really going on with Biden's cute little vacation during Thanksgiving break. We got to take a break now, though. And when we come back, I will tell you immigrants good, actually. We'll see you then.
Our audience has given us everything, so we couldn't be more connected. When we first started, people would start giving us directions and say, okay, the mics are too large, move them. Turn them into lav mics. I mean, they were incredible. And then one guy walked in and gave us a really expensive switcher and said, you guys need this, and walked out. Okay, it's amazing. They helped us build a studio. They did a $2 million funding campaign for us. And so they really are us. We do this show together to the point where some of our hosts are even former listeners. So when we say that the audience is part of TYT, we really mean it.
I think what the audience also appreciates is especially if they're members, they really get an inside look into who we are, our personal lives, what drives and motivates us. It goes beyond just storytelling. I think that what we do is allow our viewers and our listeners into our daily lives, and we give them kind of like this inside look into everything that we're passionate about and why it is that we're doing what we're doing, right? Like the motivation behind what we're doing, I think, is important for our audience to know, and we're not shy about sharing that with them. And it's different from what people typically see in legacy media outlets where everything is kind of dry and robotic and there's really no personality or authenticity that comes along with it. Oftentimes when we're doing the show, I don't really think of it as me telling them stories. I think of it as us having a mutual respect and conversation with one another. And as I said earlier, I mean, not only do I feel that through the work I do, I'm informing our audience, but they inform me oftentimes as well. You know, they'll pitch stories to us. They'll tell us, you know, a certain perspective or angle to a story that we might have missed. And I love it.
Our TYT audience has been building this show and this network with us for 20 years. Now we're expanding and connecting our audience around the world in even more exciting and powerful ways. Look, I don't want you to miss another petition, poll, community conversation, or TYT segment. Connect with informed, passionate, and compassionate progressives, and even new progressives. They're joining our movement every day. This is gonna be amazing when we work together. So our community members are learning together, they're building lifelong relationships, and even politically organizing together. Here's what Power Slave Wolf has to say as they begin interacting with our community after making TYT their #1 trusted news source. Quote, I've been a TYT viewer since the Obama years and have since found them to be a far more trustworthy news source than most TV news outlets. Away from viewing TYT, I'm a musician, electric bass guitar, sim racer, satire enthusiast, and rollerblader, the latter being my main means of intense exercise. TYT, my local news, none of the stations in my area are Sinclair owned as far as I know, and comedy style news shows are my trusted news sources. The former and the latter both having something in common in that both have something that TV news sorely lacks, a very low tolerance for BS. So sign up for free at tyt.com/community. We're making it easier to connect, stay informed, and even take action.
Hi, I'm Bartholomew Joseph Kyle. I do audio for the main show, The Young Turks. I also do audio for Post Game. I started in 2006. I met Cenk Uygur at the Iraq for Sale screening that was directed by Robert Greenwald. And watching that, I want to figure out a way to be part of something that's genuine and authentic.
Hey everyone, welcome back to TYT. I'm going to read some viewer comments, some super chats, and then we'll get right to our next story. I'm going to start with Peter Hamby in our super chat section, who writes us poems every day. Cowards among three, taking a man via racism, now face jury's wrath. Love it. It's nice, right, to have some good news, finally. And a few of you wrote in about that, which is so wonderful. So let's go to Kara Curley, who says, finally, actual murderers being locked up. Why is that so rare? Look, I mean, the burden of proof in murder cases is a very high burden. That is a good thing. I think what we see in our justice system is just two different standards, depending on a number of different factors, whether we're talking about race, whether we're talking about resources and socioeconomic status. And when the criminal justice system is supposed to be about justice, those factors should not play a role at all. And I think that's the issue we're seeing. I think the burden of proof in murder cases is the right burden. It should be a high burden, but we don't see the laws applied evenly, so that's definitely a problem. And I can totally understand why everyone, myself included, had no idea which way the jury would decide this case. No More Trigonometry says, finally some good news after a hellacious couple of weeks. Agreed. And I Am Sock says, is David Rubenstein just Dave Rubin in a trench coat and a fake mustache? Look, I have my issues with Rubenstein, there's no question, but he seems like he's got a functioning brain, in the very least. Not saying he's a good guy, but it's a functioning brain. All right, without further ado, let's get to our next story, because I love this obvious analysis coming from JP Morgan, because of course they're concerned about the economy, they're concerned about their bottom line, and all of a sudden they're ringing the alarm in regard to anti-immigration policies and how it's already begun to hurt our economy. So, anti-immigration policies are already starting to hurt the economy. And that's not something that I'm saying. That's something that analysts over at JP Morgan are saying, because they're noticing that the pool of workers, and I'm not just talking about the labor shortage today, I'm talking about the labor shortage in the future, the pool of workers is going to be much smaller than what was previously expected. Now, there are many factors contributing to that, and anti-immigration policies happen to be one of the biggest factors. Population slowdown threatens trend growth, the November 12th note from JP Morgan stated, highlighting the fact that due to more aging boomers retiring from the workforce and 3 million fewer immigrants in the country, trend labor force growth is going to be limited at only 0.1% per year and risks hurting overall GDP growth. So they put together this fun little chart, fun little graph that I wanted to share with you all so you can kind of it'll help you visualize what was expected and what the shortfall looks like. So If you look at the pre-2017 trend, that's the orange line. It indicates the population growth that the economy would come to depend on to function appropriately. And then you look at the actual numbers and you see a pretty steep decline beginning in 2016. Gee, I wonder why. And of course, the anti-immigration policies coming from the Trump administration and then the continuation of those policies by the Biden administration has been pretty disastrous. And so I also want to be clear about one thing. What we're talking about here is legal immigration, okay? We're talking about workers who typically legally came into the country with visas meant to fill jobs, to work in certain industries and what have you. And so the anti-immigration policies coming from the Trump administration weren't just about ending undocumented immigration into the United States. It was about ending all immigration. And I think that while, his core base, Trump's core base, was under the assumption that that would somehow be a net positive for the country, that it would actually be positive in reserving or conserving our resources, fact of the matter is that's really not the way things work. So I wanted to give you some more information about that. And mind you, the other factor you should keep in mind is that population growth has slowed down considerably even without the immigration policies, because the birth rate has gone down pretty dramatically. In fact, it's gone down 6 years in a row as more and more couples are deciding against ever having children. Now, JP Morgan researchers noted that the Census Bureau estimated that the working age population, ages 16 to 64, peaked in 2019 and has finally been falling for almost 2 years. The estimates now put the working age population in 2021 at 2.5 million below expectations. The vast majority in the shortfall of these workers was a result of a decline in immigration to the United States, the researchers added, beginning during the Trump administration and continuing through the COVID pandemic. And, when you really take a step back and you look at this country's history, it's kind of hard to remember that the Republican Party wasn't always as vicious as it is today in regard to immigration. In fact, when it came to undocumented immigrants in the United States, one of the most, I would argue, progressive laws that was signed by President Ronald Reagan in 1987. He actually provided amnesty to the undocumented immigrants who were in the country at the time. Now, that's not to say that Ronald Reagan was this incredible, fantastic president who I agreed on or agreed with on everything. But when it came to the topic of immigration, if you watch debates between, let's say, even Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush on the topic of immigration, it sounds like two liberals debating that issue. And so you can see that the Republican Party has relied more and more on their culture wars, immigration being part of that culture war, to do their campaigning. They've become more and more extreme because really, what else are they going to offer to their constituents, right? The fear and the hate is what you get over and over again in these GOP campaigns, certainly on a presidential level as of late. And so I want to go back to what Reagan was like, because in 1986, 1986 was when Ronald Reagan signed that bill. It was called the Immigration Reform and Control Act. And again, it provided amnesty to most undocumented immigrants who came to the country prior to 1982. And here's Ronald Reagan explaining during a debate why he chose to sign that legislation into law.
I supported this bill. I believe in the idea of amnesty for those who have put down roots and who have lived here, even though some time back they may have entered illegally. With regard to the employer sanctions, we must have that, not only to ensure that we can identify the illegal aliens, but also, while some keep protesting about what it would do to employers, there is another employer that we shouldn't be so concerned about. And these are employers down through the years who have encouraged the illegal entry into this country, because they then hire these individuals and hire them at starvation wages and with none of the benefits that we think are normal and natural for workers in our country, and the individuals can't complain because of their illegal status.
No, but you guys, let that sink in for a second. What he said there was absolutely correct. Part of the legislation he signed into law in 1986 would basically penalize employers who hire undocumented immigrants. Now, you can argue that that's just a way to punish undocumented immigrants, and I definitely agree that there's that element to it. However, there's an issue with employers specifically hiring undocumented labor because they can pay them whatever they want. And what are the undocumented workers going to do? Complain about it? Are they going to go to the authorities? They're in the country in an undocumented status and could get deported. And so that ends up driving wages down for everyone, not to mention it leads to abuse of undocumented immigrants. And so what Ronald Reagan was saying there was actually 100% correct, right? Providing amnesty for the undocumented immigrants in the country already was really important in providing worker protections to them and also ensuring that it didn't lead to wages being driven down as a result of, underpaid undocumented labor. So I just wanted to provide that example because when you look at the Republican Party today, it just shows how much they've decided to lean into the xenophobia, how much they've decided to lean into anti-immigration rhetoric, specifically for campaigning purposes, specifically for their, honestly, 100% pivot to culture war and culture war only. And it doesn't have to be that way. And at the end of the day, the very people who have allowed that hate messaging to persuade them might actually be harmed by that kind of thinking in the future. And I'm just talking about economically. At least that's what we're seeing in the analysis that's already coming out from JP Morgan. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we've got more news for you all, including, let's see, what do I have for you guys later? Oh, companies are raising their prices using inflation as an excuse. But what's really at play? We'll give you those details and more.
I'm old enough that I remember when Captain Crunch put the berries in there.
Yay, crunch berries!
And I was like, ooh, the fake berries.
Remember?
We're gonna try that.
We did a story back in the day about how a woman sued, General Mills.
She'd been eating it for 4 years, believing that it was actual berries.
Yeah. She's like, these aren't real berries at all. Yeah. I'm like, I got news for you. Captain Crunch isn't really a captain or a person. Joining me now, legendary whistleblower and American hero, Edward Snowden. First question is, hey, where are you?
I'm in my apartment in Moscow.
All of a sudden, in the studio, Jim Gaffigan, everybody.
Mental illness is, completely undiagnosed in our society.
It's not about a particular administration. It's about a broken system of power, and through that, really, the instrumentalization of a system of not justice, but injustice.
People understand whether they claim to deny climate change or not. Our collective house is in crisis. We're also dealing with the legacy of 40 years of economic policies that have made people's lives more precarious.
Sometimes you got to force people into their humanity. Sometimes you have to shake people into empathy.
Senator Elizabeth Warren joins us in the studio.
Healthcare is a basic human right, and we are fighting for basic human rights.
In order to actually achieve that vision of everyone having access to the same resources and getting to determine the outcome of their life, we have a lot of work to do, and it needs to start right now.
Here's something you may not know. When you deposit your money in a big bank, it doesn't just sit, safe and secure, in a vault. Instead, your money could end up building oil pipelines, mining for coal, or drilling in the Arctic. So if you're concerned about the planet, give your money something good to do. Make the move to green with Aspiration's fossil fuel-free account and join the thousands each week who are switching to save their dollars and save the planet at the same time.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Idarola. This is gonna be a big one.
What Donald Trump has done as president has cut taxes for the wealthy and made life better for rich people. But he's made life worse for poor people.
We're making America great again by throwing more money at the military to destroy other countries because that makes us great instead of investing it in ourselves.
That it's Donald Trump and it's Stephen Miller.
The choosing is based on wanting to create cruel and inhumane conditions to scare other people away from ever coming to the United States.
The opportunity to make money off of tragedy is the American way.
There is only one place to put garbage people: in the trash.
We've never had so much access to so much information with so little idea of what the hell is going on.
What does enforcing our borders have to do with traumatizing children? Absolutely nothing.
I think a sane person could say the current situation we have right now is radical. But what we're doing is literally making the world more like hell. That's a warning sign.
ShopTYT.com now has books. One of them is Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People. That's a saying that AOC said, they've got money, we've got people. It's the best tracing of the AOC victory I have seen anywhere. It's the most accurate, and it's got great details. The book actually goes all the way back to Jesse Jackson and how he was the original Bernie Sanders. If you want to know how we're going to win going forward, those lessons are super important, and they're in Ryan's book. So check it out right now at ShopTYT.com.
We found the perfect person to lead the army, Allison Hartson.
The establishment media works hand in glove with our corporate legislators, and our corporate legislators work hand in glove with the corporation. And we're going to make it so that it's a decentralized force throughout the country so that we can quickly identify stories, quickly identify troll farms, and go in and neutralize the enemy, and then start building responsible media throughout the country and on every platform available.
Welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian with from the Damage Report will be joining me in the second hour. For now, though, I'm going to read a few of our member comments, starting with Jenks A Lot Mansion, who says, "Hey, Anna, just got my TYT hat and shirt in the mail today. Happy early birthday to me." Yes, happy birthday. Keep going strong, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. I hope you guys have an awesome Thanksgiving break. Shikata writes in and says, "So you don't like Mexican illegals? Good. Then do your own roofing, your own paving, your own construction, and pick your own fruit and vegetables." Yeah, I mean, I just think that people tend to take others for granted until they experience the ramifications of taking those people for granted. And I mean, immigrants are such an important part of this country. And, you know, ending immigration, which is effectively what Trump did. I'm not just talking about illegal immigration. I'm talking about legal immigration has already been pretty bad for the economy. And it's just fascinating to see, you know, Wall Street analysts panicking about it. In our new YouTube members section, we've got We Dem Boys. Thank you for becoming a new member. Dean Ellis and Susan Blackburn. We're going to have an awesome bonus episode. I'm unfortunately not going to be able to join it, but Brett Ehrlich is going to be stepping in for me, and John Idarola will be joining him. And there's some really, really fun stories you don't want to miss. So you can become a member by going to tyt.com/join. Or if you're watching on YouTube, just click on that join button and you'll be presented with a list of options, and you can join at whatever tier you feel comfortable with. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about how some of the most profitable corporations are taking advantage of the inflation narrative to justify their price hikes. Dollar Tree executives are using inflation as an excuse to raise their prices to something that makes the name of their company completely irrelevant. So this comes as the company, by the way, is making record profits. Dollar Tree CEO Michael Wisniewski, who raked in around $11 million in total compensation last year in 2020, announced Tuesday that his company is raising prices to $1.25 at stores across the United States, pointing to the current inflationary environment. So Warren Gunnels, who, of course, works closely with Bernie Sanders, he is the director for Senate Budget Chair Bernie Sanders, had a great tweet about this, and I noticed it got a lot of attention for good reason. He writes, Dollar Tree made over $1 billion, $1.23 billion in profits this year, and then gave its CEO over $10 million in pay, while its workers get as little as $8.32 an hour. Over 7,400 Dollar Tree employees are forced to rely on food stamps and Medicaid subsidized by U.S. taxpayers. Cite the damn corporate greed. And I loved that tweet because the media's coverage of this has been absolute garbage, because they just take what the corporate executives say at face value. Oh, I mean, inflation, it's inflation. They say it's inflation, so they have to raise their prices. Okay, but does that really make sense? How about dig in? How about dig into the financials, the basics when it comes to the company health? Like, how much money did they bring in 2020? Did they really suffer from the pandemic? What are the real issues here? Just raising prices to $1.25. It might not sound like a big deal to you, might not sound like a big deal to a lot of people, but consider, the people who rely on these discount stores to make ends meet. I mean, 25 cents is a pretty significant increase in price, right? When it comes to items that people need to buy from stores like Dollar Tree. And I love that Warren Gunnels wants these reporters to cite the corporate greed, because you're not going to get that citation. I'll give you a good example of that. Here is one way that you're likely to see this story covered in the press.
On Wall Street, positive reaction. Investors have long been pressuring these dollar stores to raise their prices. Dollar Tree's stock price soaring in response to this news. On Main Street, a far less kind reaction.
Oh, is Wall Street really happy about this news? Remember, it's all about maximizing profits. Maximizing profits means a better return for shareholders. So of course shareholders love that Dollar Tree has increased its prices. I mean, that's what they've been pressuring the executives to do, and that's exactly what they did. Now, let's get back to corporate CEOs and how they performed, how much money they made. That's a better way of putting it. How much money they made during the pandemic. So the Institute for Policy Studies noted in a May study that the CEO for the Dollar Tree, who took over as the Dollar Tree CEO in July of 2020, received $11.3 million in total compensation last year. That's 715 times as much as the pay for the company's median worker, a part-time U.S. store employee who earned $15,816. But by the way, don't think that the dollar store is this isolated case. This practice is really seen across the board when it comes to the most profitable corporations in the country. So in 2020, according to a recent analysis by the Economic Policy Institute, CEOs made 351 times as much as a typical worker, and CEO pay has soared by a whopping 1,322% since 1978. Oh, they're doing just fine, just fine. And they'll use any example to maximize their profits. In this case, oh, we're worried about inflation. Inflation's hitting us hard. We got to raise our prices. Of course they would do that. Gives them an excuse to make more money without having to change a damn thing, right? A report released earlier this month by the watchdog group Accountable.us found that at least a dozen major U.S. corporations have reported nearly $11 billion in profits. The same quarter, they announced price increases, along with over $34 billion in stock buybacks and dividends this year. And some of those companies, by the way, include Procter & Gamble, PepsiCo, Coca-Cola. They ain't hungry. They're doing well. They're doing real well. But they could be making more money by exploiting the awful reporting on inflation that we've seen in the press, and that's exactly what they're doing right now. So there you have it. I'm going to read one more graphic because this is important. This is from the Wall Street Journal of all places. They say that nearly 2 out of 3 of the biggest U.S. publicly traded companies have profited or reported fatter profit margins so far this year. than they did over the same stretch of 2019. They're doing better today than they did prior to the pandemic. Nearly 100 of these giants have booked 2021 profit margins. The share of each dollar of sales a company can pocket that are at least 50% above 2019 levels. But they probably don't want the media to report that because they want to justify the price increases as if they're really, really suffering and struggling with inflation. It's just absolute garbage. I mean, it just shows you how much the corporate media helps to either provide cover or even do the bidding of these corporate goons. All right, I'm going to do one more story before we bring John in to help me do the second hour. We've got a lot of great stories to share with you there. Let me get my papers in order. I want to talk about Ronna McDaniel because she's in a bit of a pickle here. RNC chair Ronna McDaniel must have forgotten the fact that the Republican Party didn't really stand in support or in favor of gay couples in this country, because now she's facing some backlash following her decision to say that she wanted to create an RNC Pride coalition. Okay, now she got backlash from some GOP leadership in states like Oklahoma, for instance. One person I have in mind is the head of the Oklahoma GOP. In a 1,100-word fundraising email headed "RNC chair must change course or resign," Oklahoma GOP chair John Bennett said Ronna McDaniel must resign if she cannot or will not stand for who we say we are. And by the way, let's be clear, the RNC platform still says that Republicans are against gay couples. Let me give you more. McDaniel crossed conservative Christians when she announced the creation of an RNC Pride coalition at the annual Spirit of Lincoln dinner put on by Log Cabin Republicans, a group of conservative LGBTQ party members who are apparently also oblivious to the fact that the individuals that they support absolutely hate them. The event held November 9th at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago club. So the email also said some other pretty terrible things. Bennett not pleased with Ronna McDaniel. The Oklahoma GOP will not cooperate with this decision. And as your chairman, I assure the Oklahoma Republican Party that I will continue to stand up for our Republican Party values and our principles. He added that religious freedom is flat out incompatible with the pillars of the LGBT movement. So the civil rights of others are incompatible with religious liberty. Okay, religious liberty should be you are free to practice your religion as long as it doesn't harm other people. You can't cite your religion for your reasons of, or reason to discriminate against certain people, right? But I just think it's so fascinating because here, I mean, he's making it abundantly clear that he believes that his particular religious beliefs take priority over the civil rights of members of the LGBT community. And to be sure, I know a huge portion of this country doesn't see it as a civil rights issue. It's a civil rights issue. Let me give you more. He says this, Bennett, let's clear the way for those who are either too incompetent, I love that he's calling others incompetent, or too selfish to actually defend liberty and our Judeo-Christian founding. So this guy's a complete clown. Okay, and Bennett also blasted a handful of Log Cabin Republicans and the policies that they're trying to champion because he just doesn't like gay people. Same with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Marjorie Taylor Greene was also pretty furious about this statement from Ronna McDaniel. But I also want to unpack what the intentions are here, because Ronna McDaniel isn't some lefty who's looking to protect the rights of the gay community. No, she's trying to find a way to, on one hand, placate the Log Cabin Republicans, who are gay Republicans, LGBT members who identify as Republicans, which still blows my mind. She's also doing it because they want to expand their base. And so discriminating against certain groups of people doesn't really help when you're trying to expand your base. And so while on one hand, she's trying to be a little more welcoming to the gay community, when you look at the actual party platform, Republicans remain exactly who they've always been, right? So they say, this is the last graphic, traditional marriage and family based on marriage between one man and one woman is the foundation for this is so amazing, free society that has for millennia been entrusted with rearing children and instilling cultural values. No, yet they think that banning gay marriage today, this is the GOP's party platform. This is their party platform today. Not in 2010, not 50 years ago, today. They think that banning gay marriage is what leads to a free society. That's who they are. So spare me the sweet talk toward the gay community, Ronna McDaniel. We know what you're really up to. But I do love that she got burned by the more extreme elements of her own party who literally just can't hide their hate, even when it can be politically advantageous for them to do so. All right, we got to take a break. When I come back, John Iadarola will be joining me for some more stories, for some fun in the second hour. Don't miss it. We'll see you in a few minutes.
Our audience has given us everything, so we couldn't be more connected. When we first started, people would start giving us directions and say, okay, the mics are too large, move them. Turn them into lav mics. I mean, they were incredible. And then one guy walked in and gave us a really expensive switcher and said, you guys need this, and walked out. Okay, it's amazing. They helped us build a studio. They did a $2 million funding campaign for us. And so they really are us. We do this show together to the point where some of our hosts are even former listeners. So when we say that the audience is part of TYT, we really mean it.
I think what the audience also appreciates is especially if they're members, they really get an inside look into who we are, our personal lives, what drives and motivates us. It goes beyond just storytelling. I think that what we do is allow our viewers and our listeners into our daily lives, and we give them kind of like this inside look into everything that we're passionate about and why it is that we're doing what we're doing, right? Like the motivation behind what we're doing, I think, is important for our audience to know, and we're not shy about sharing that with them. And it's different from what people typically see in legacy media outlets where everything is kind of dry and robotic and there's really no personality or authenticity that comes along with it. Oftentimes when we're doing the show, I don't really think of it as me telling them stories. I think of it as us having a mutual respect and conversation with one another. And as I said earlier, I mean, not only do I feel that through the work I do, I'm informing our audience, but they inform me oftentimes as well. You know, they'll pitch stories to us. They'll tell us, you know, a certain perspective or angle to a story that we might have missed. And I love it.
Our TYT audience has been building this show and this network with us for 20 years. Now we're expanding and connecting our audience around the world in even more exciting and powerful ways. Look, I don't want you to miss another petition, poll, community conversation, or TYT segment. Connect with informed, passionate, and compassionate progressives, and even new progressives. They're joining our movement every day. This is going to be amazing when we work together. So our community members are learning together, they're building lifelong relationships, and even politically organizing together. Here's what Power Slave Wolf has to say as they begin interacting with our community after making TYT their #1 trusted news source. Quote, I've been a TYT viewer since the Obama years and have since found them to be a far more trustworthy news source than most TV news outlets. Away from viewing TYT, I'm a musician, electric bass guitar, sim racer, satire enthusiast, and rollerblader, the latter being my main means of intense exercise. TYT, my local news, none of the stations in my area are Sinclair owned as far as I know, and comedy style news shows are my trusted news sources. The former and the latter both having something in common in that both have something that TV news sorely lacks, a very low tolerance for BS. So sign up for free at tyt.com/community. We're making it easier to connect, stay informed, and even take action.
Hi, I'm Bartholomew Joseph Kyle. I do audio for the main show, The Young Turks. I also do audio for Post Game. I started in 2006. I met Cenk Uygur at the Iraq for Sale screening that was directed by Robert Greenwald. And watching that, I want to figure out a way to be part of something that's genuine and authentic.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian and John Idarola with you, the homie, and also the host of the Damage Report. John, how you doing?
I'm good. I am so ready for Thanksgiving. What about you?
I'm super ready for Thanksgiving. In fact, I had to multitask today because I'm helping. My mom's hosting, but I'm also, I want to help as much as possible. So I'm doing a lot of like prep work while doing production work for the show. But I'm excited. I already made my caramelized onion dip. All I got to do is pop it in the oven tomorrow.
Sounds good.
I'm making Cuban pastries, including croquetas. I'm super excited.
I was going to ask. No, I'm glad. I'm glad. Can I just say this? I don't know. Is this controversial? Doesn't it feel like Thanksgiving, you should get the day before Thanksgiving off, like Christmas Eve, I feel like. Shouldn't you? Like you need to
I'm not going to protest
today.
that. Like, I would love that. That'd be amazing.
I think next day before Thanksgiving, we strike. How about that?
I'm not going to fight that. That's for sure. Anyway,
we're already working from home. I guess that's halfway.
Yeah, we are lucky in that regard. By the way, John Idarola has the correct take on green bean casserole and how it really has no place on either the Thanksgiving table or any dinner table at all. But his favorite dish is the creamed corn.
That is not my favorite dish.
That's what I hear.
It's one of my favorite. Stuffing is my favorite dish.
Oh, yeah, I love stuffing.
Oh God, it's so good. It's all you
All
need.
right. Well, I did want to read a few of our, or give a shout out to some of our Twitch viewers, including Abelina Sabrina, who raided us, which is a good thing in the Twitch community. Thank you for the raid. Also, Dave Schmidt gifted 2 subs. Someone from Flint also gifted 2 subs. Drew in Georgia gifted 2 subs. Zolo Juro gifted 5 subs. Jeff Waldorf also gifted a sub. And I wanted to read this quick comment from Queen Faye, who's been subscribed for 2 months through Prime. Good evening, Dragon fam. I hope you're all well. Can't believe it's already been a month as a Dragon. I've watched on and off for a really long time, probably 15 years or so. Even when I thought I was conservative, I watched TYT. Love y'all. I'm always amazed when conservatives watch us and do it because for reasons other than hate watching, right? I respect that. I really like that. Thank you. Thank you to all the conservative people who watch the show just because they want to hear the other side. I think that's admirable. And hopefully we can persuade you to come to us, not just for the show, but in general, politically. Anyway, let's move on. You ready, John?
Yes, I am.
Clear. All right. Well, there's some more Rittenhouse news today that I thought we would jump into. So Kyle Rittenhouse claims that he fired the first 2 attorneys representing him, Lin Wood and John Pierce, because they were using him to raise money and actually withheld the funds that were raised for bail, which meant that he spent more time in jail than he should have. Now, he talks about it during an interview with Ashley Banfield. Let's hear what he has to say.
Lin Wood and John Pierce, on August 27th, became counsel, and they started raising money, and they raised over $2 million before September 5th of 2020, and they wanted to fight extradition with a militia argument, which I didn't even know what a militia was until November 20th when I got bailed out. but they went on to say that I was in an unorganized militia, which is just not true, and they didn't respect my wishes, and they kept me away from my family for 87 days, and I thank them for raising the money, but I could have been bailed out a lot sooner in September if they hadn't kept me in jail.
Now, keep in mind, Lin Wood is one of the lunatic Trump loyalists who continues to push the notion that the election was stolen from Donald Trump. I mean, he was so outrageous that even the Trump camp started to distance itself from him. And here he comes in and immediately tries to represent Kyle Rittenhouse. Kyle Rittenhouse's family decides to work with him. And he just decided to exploit the situation based on what Rittenhouse is saying to raise money and honestly provide one of the most ridiculous. I mean, I don't know what that defense would have been. That I don't know if that's even a defense. Like, oh, he was part of an unorganized militia. Like, how would that help him? Anyway.
They maybe thought that, well, that's enough. You got the Second Amendment. There's the word malicious in there. I know we spent the past 200 years pretending we don't see it in that sentence, but now suddenly we see it. He's a militia by himself, I guess. I don't know. It's a stupid thing for Lin Wood to say, but it's also the smartest thing that he's ever said that I've actually seen. He's a madman. And now you can add trusting him even temporarily. By the way, look, if he was stealing money from Kyle Rittenhouse, first of all, I'm not surprised. I don't know that it's true, but I'm not surprised that he was using him for his own ends. He's a grifter. One of the potential silver linings to come out of this is, in theory, people might be able to learn something in general about how pervasive and popular these grifters are. But it's not going to come out that way. I've seen even conservatives saying stuff about how Lin Wood has gone too far or whatever. But they're not learning any general lessons about grift. They're just saying, oh, he's not the right guy. But he was trusted for some time. And so we're supposed to believe that this kid who has been presented to us as this incredibly responsible, hardworking, thinking about his community kid, who's so ahead of, like, when I was 18, I wasn't going to other cities' protests to protect car dealerships or whatever. But at the same time, he didn't know anything about Lin Wood, didn't know that he wasn't trustworthy, didn't know that he was posing with Proud Boys, didn't know what the OK symbol represented years after it had already been discussed widely, constantly. He didn't know what a militia was. He didn't know all of these things. So he doesn't apparently know what signal he's giving by, as you're going to show, the new friend that he has in Mar-a-Lago. He doesn't know what it means to do a documentary with Tucker Carlson literally while your trial is ongoing. So which is he? Is he a way ahead of his time, super responsible, awesome patriot, or a kid who's bumbling through life, not knowing anything in this world that he's willingly injected himself into?
I mean, it could be a mix of both. Like, I mean, I definitely think that I do think back to when I was 17, and was I aware of everything that was going on in politics? Definitely not. But Kyle Rittenhouse, like, the fact that he was motivated to go to Kenosha and kind of like join in with that, like there were members of militia groups there. They weren't organized and working together, but he was very clearly with them while he was there. Look, I don't know what to believe, right? Like, this is what he's claiming. It's really whether you choose to believe him or not. I do find some of the stuff that he says in the context of this interview hard to believe, but there's really no way of knowing for sure. I want to go to the next video, though, because he kind of expands on how he feels about Lin Wood and why his family chose to eventually fire him.
When and how did you find out that they had raised enough money for your bail and still weren't posting it?
Shortly before I fired before my mom fired Lin Wood, and I want to say December.
But why would she fire him? Did she fire him because she found out that the money was in the pot but wasn't being put towards bail?
We fired him because he was like going on with all this QAnon and election fraud stuff and just stuff we don't agree with.
And so it was his political views that led to you firing Lin Wood?
A mixture of a little bit of that.
And what else was in the mix?
Just how he is as a person.
And what does that mean?
He's insane.
He's insane, which I agree with. But I thought a more interesting part of that interview was where he talks about, he believes in crazy things like the QAnon stuff and that the election was stolen. And it's like, Rittenhouse thinks that's crazy stuff. Because some of his most avid supporters, I don't know. He's definitely said things in both the Tucker interview and this interview that does not go along with what Trump's base is, what they typically believe.
Sure. Yeah. Look, and in theory, that could represent something. If he didn't want to be around or be affiliated, he didn't want his name to be tied to Lin Wood because Lin Wood was saying crazy things about the election supposedly being stolen and, speaking out defensively about the whole QAnon thing. Okay, then that would be a sign in his favor. But if he's doing interviews with Tucker Carlson has spent all this time denying the election was legitimate, and he's been really defensive. And he doesn't often delve into the whole QAnon thing, but when he does, he speaks defensively about those people. Why is everyone so focused on this? There's all these other conspiracy theories trying to both sides it. And well, as you're going to get into, he's been hanging out with one prominent former president who certainly talks a lot about how the election was stolen. So do you want to affiliate with these people that are making those claims, or do you not? Or is it just convenient to be able to stop affiliating with one person and claim that the reason is something that makes you look rational by comparison, but then you continue to spend all your time with people who are spreading the same BS?
Yeah, and look, you have all of these right-wingers like fighting, to be affiliated with Rittenhouse in one way or the other because they do raise money off of him. And let's just go to the picture that John keeps referencing, because immediately after the jury handed the verdict of not guilty, Rittenhouse did travel to Mar-a-Lago and was pictured with former President Donald Trump. And fascinating photo with Kim Jong-un in the background. Just recently, we shared similar images of Donald Trump wearing a Taekwondo getup and an honorary black belt that was given to him with like the same picture of Kim Jong-un in the background. Just amazing. But yeah, I totally get what you're saying. And I think you're right, John, in that the very people that he affiliated himself with after the trial is just as bad. Right. Yeah. So whether you believe his like ignorance about the Proud Boys before it doesn't matter. What matters is, who he has decided to work with today, who he decided to give the first interview to. That's Tucker Carlson, who was embedded during the trial, Tucker Carlson and his crew. And then you take a picture with the very man who took hate, racism, xenophobia, all of that stuff, which has existed in this country, but it was kind of lurking in the shadows. He took it and like made it totally okay to be overt and transparent in that hatred. And then finally, I want to go to the last video where finally, I mean, Tucker Carlson didn't ask this question. It was very nice to see someone else ask the question of, why did you take that picture with the Proud Boys? Let's watch.
You have stated that you are not a racist, but yet there's video footage of you using hand signs that are used by groups that are considered by many to be white supremacists. Why have you associated with members of groups like the Proud Boys? Why have you used hand signs that are commonly associated with white supremacy?
That's a good question. I didn't know that the OK hand sign was a symbol for white supremacy, just as I didn't know that those people in the bar were Proud Boys. They were set up by my former attorney, who was fired because of that, for putting me in situations like that with people I don't agree with, by having them set up for security without telling us their background. And if I would have known they were Proud Boys, I would have said absolutely not.
So, to be clear, which attorney put you in that bar?
John Pierce.
He took you to that bar?
He arranged it. He wasn't there, but he set it up and arranged it.
So, John, what say you? Is it John Pierce's fault? Is Kyle Rittenhouse just an innocent, unsuspecting victim of John Pierce's poor decisions? Or are you not buying it?
I mean, anything is possible. It is possible to pose with people and not know. I mean, it's possibly posed with 100 people. I don't know. They could have packed that bar. There are lots of people who are big fans on the right of vigilante killers. So sure, maybe he was doing a whole line of, you got some like 3%ers, you got some Oath Keepers, some Proud Boys, some neo-Nazis. He can't know what all of their group affiliations are. That is possible, certainly. It's possible that he didn't know about the OK symbol, even though we had already been through this so many times in the country over literally years. It's impossible. It is at the same time very convenient to say, I don't know who anybody is. I don't know what anything is. Okay, well, you can use that as a defense. Maybe it's true, which is why we get to look into other things that he's done. Him going to Kenosha is not unconnected to an evaluation of what he thinks about these topics. His choice of who he gives a documentary profile of him, the presidents and other former politicians that he cozies up to. We get to see all of these things. If he's so anti-Proud Boy and anti-QAnon and anti, the big lie, well, we're going to see how his media tour continues and who, not just today and this week, but in a month and 6 weeks and in a year, who is he affiliating himself with? What projects is he getting involved with? What products is he endorsing? Because he's not going to simply go away. He's had a taste of this and he wants more. So we'll see how his future behavior matches up to the way he's presenting himself immediately following his acquittal.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Actions speak louder than words, and I guess we'll see which direction he goes in. He told Tucker Carlson that he wants to live a quiet life, that he plans on going to Arizona State University to either study law or nursing. We'll see how that all plays out. And you know what? To be honest, I hope he does go in that direction. But I'm also sure that pull by the right wing, that pull of celebrity and some of the benefits that come along with that might overpower his sensibilities. But who knows? We'll see. Anyway, we got to take a break. When we come back, some of the insane people who are trying to cash in on Rittenhouse's celebrity when we return.
Our audience has given us everything, so we couldn't be more connected. When we first started, people would start giving us directions and say, okay, the mics are too large, move them. Turn them into lav mics. I mean, they were incredible. And then one guy walked in and gave us a really expensive switcher and said, you guys need this, and walked out. Okay, it's amazing. They helped us build a studio. They did a $2 million funding campaign for us. And so they really are us. We do this show together to the point where some of our hosts are even former listeners. So when we say that the audience is part of TYT, we really mean it.
I think what the audience also appreciates is especially if they're members, they really get an inside look into who we are, our personal lives, what drives and motivates us. It goes beyond just storytelling. I think that what we do is allow our viewers and our listeners into our daily lives, and we give them kind of like this inside look into everything that we're passionate about and why it is that we're doing what we're doing, right? Like the motivation behind what we're doing, I think, is important for our audience to know, and we're not shy about sharing that with them. And it's different from what people typically see in legacy media outlets where everything is kind of dry and robotic and there's really no personality or authenticity that comes along with it. Oftentimes when we're doing the show, I don't really think of it as me telling them stories. I think of it as us having a mutual respect and conversation with one another. And as I said earlier, I mean, not only do I feel that through the work I do, I'm informing our audience, but they inform me oftentimes as well. You know, they'll pitch stories to us. They'll tell us, a certain perspective or angle to a story that we might have missed. And I love it.
Our TYT audience has been building this show and this network with us for 20 years. Now we're expanding and connecting our audience around the world in even more exciting and powerful ways. Look, I don't want you to miss another petition, poll, community conversation, or TYT segment. Connect with informed, passionate, and compassionate progressives, and even new progressives. They're joining our movement every day. This is going to be amazing when we work together. So our community members are learning together, they're building lifelong relationships, and even politically organizing together. Here's what Power Slave Wolf has to say as they begin interacting with our community after making TYT their #1 trusted news source. Quote, I've been a TYT viewer since the Obama years and have since found them to be a far more trustworthy news source than most TV news outlets. Away from viewing TYT, I'm a musician, electric bass guitar, sim racer, satire enthusiast, and rollerblader, the latter being my main means of intense exercise. TYT, my local news, none of the stations in my area are Sinclair owned as far as I know, and comedy style news shows are my trusted news sources. The former and the latter both having something in common in that both have something that TV news sorely lacks, a very low tolerance for BS. So sign up for free at tyt.com/community. We're making it easier to connect, stay informed, and even take action.
Hi, I'm Bartholomew Joseph Kyle. I do audio for the main show, The Young Turks. I also do audio for Post Game. I started in 2006. I met Cenk Uygur at the Iraq for Sale screening that was directed by Robert Greenwald. And watching that, I want to figure out a way to be part of something that's genuine and authentic.
Welcome back, everyone. Anna Kasparian and John Idarola with you. The Aardvark in our members section says, Anna, first Limp Biscuit and now green bean casserole? I'm traumatized. I like Limp Biscuit. I don't like green bean casserole. So I don't know if is that like.
I think they have the opposite positions on both. I think they're just done with you. That's 2 strikes.
You like
and
green
if I know
bean
baseball,
casserole?
that's it.
Like what? Who likes green bean casserole? It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable.
You put green bean casserole on the table to pretend, look, we've got healthy stuff too. You don't eat it though.
Is it even healthy? It's like full of
Kvass.
creamy stuff. It's not even healthy.
Well, that sounds good now that you put it that way. But no, I eat the stuffing and the mash. Shut up and eat the carbs.
Totally.
It's a tradition.
I like the protein too. I like turkey. I'm into turkey.
I like turkey. I think turkey's fine.
Love Doctor 7277 says, people, whatever you were taught about the economy in college is all BS. It is the economy for rich people. It's not meant for you or I. Also, special thanks to our YouTube members, including Blah2257, Stacy Defunk Boogie, thank you, Karen Randall, Doug X, Michelle Johnson, all new YouTube members. If you're interested in becoming a YouTube member and getting all the perks that come along with that, including our daily bonus episodes, just click on that join button if you're watching on YouTube or go to tyt.com/join. Tyler Hackner says, in my opinion, true justice would be Ahmaud being alive, but also this is surely accountability. And Progressive Canuck, aka Maple Syrup Dragon, says, another case of right-wing lynchings. At least this is one of the few that get actual justice. How many more until we start to see actual steps being taken to fight the injustice that is so blatant?
Yeah. And what if there was no video?
And I know that is such an important point. I mean, I don't think there'd be justice in this case without that video. Remember, that's the video that the jurors wanted to review while they were deliberating. And I think it's so damning because it shows the inconsistencies in the story that the McMichaels told the cops. So, all right, well, let's talk about the injustice of actual lunatics serving in Congress, starting with Lauren Boebert. So, right-wing lawmakers have decided to continue trying to cash in on Kyle Rittenhouse's celebrity among conservatives. One of those people is Lauren Boebert, who said something that maybe she didn't think too much about prior to saying it. Let's hear from the Colorado representative.
And I am so thrilled at the jury's verdict here. Now, I do have some colleagues on the Hill who have just like me, offered Kyle Rittenhouse an internship in their office. And, Madison Cawthorn, he said that he would arm wrestle me for this Kyle Rittenhouse internship. But Madison Cawthorn has some pretty big guns. And so I would like to challenge him to a sprint instead. Let's make this fair.
Oh my God. So Madison Cawthorn, he's partially paralyzed and is in a wheelchair. So challenging him to a sprint because you're concerned about his big guns and don't want to do an arm wrestling match. Just think about what you're going to say before you say it.
Yeah, maybe she did. They're very weird people. They are bizarre people who are fairly empty, save for a weird knee-jerk need to troll people, which is why I approach this sort of story with a great deal of trepidation. God only knows what their motivations is when they say what they say. I mean, immediately I can say it's super cringy to be the first person to offer the guy who you only know because he killed people an internship. But when you're the fifth person to do it, that's just sad. That's just try hard at this point. She was literally after all the rest of them. In terms of the sprinting thing, I don't know. Maybe they know each other. Maybe it's a weird joke that they make. I at this point, I don't even care. It's the fifth weirdest offensive thing that she said today. I don't know. Maybe it's a thing between them. I have no idea.
I don't think she even really thought about it. She just said it. But no, for me, what's interesting is to see how quickly all of these right-wing lawmakers jumped on the Rittenhouse story. Because as I say on the show repeatedly, I'm sure you guys are tired of me repeating it, right-wing lawmakers and Democrats to an extent as well love to lean in on these types of issues as a way of kind of keeping their name in the press, as a way of, increasing their name recognition. Mm-hmm. And the reason why they do it is because what other option do they have? What else is Lauren Boebert gonna get in the press about?
Anna,
what would she talk about?
List for me the top 3 issues Lauren Boebert's an expert on.
QAnon, not in the right way, unfortunately.
Fauci lied and people died. No, that's none of them. None of them have anything to offer. So they just glom onto things. They're just grifters. There's a few different species of grifters. Some of them have shows on Fox. Some of them have shows on YouTube. Some of them have been elected to Congress. It's all the same thing, and they all talk about exactly the same things. And none has any true comparative advantage other than maybe she's less compelling on video, so this is the only route she could take. I don't know.
Well, if you're concerned that the conversation just ended there, John, don't worry, because Sebastian Gorka also weighed in on this incredibly important topic. So let's watch.
How about I offer this? Allow me to arm wrestle him on your behalf. I love a good arm wrestle, and I would be happy. Madison's a buddy. I'd be happy to arm wrestle him on your behalf.
Oh, yes, the alpha males are back. So there you have it, John.
I frequently forget that he exists, and those are the happy times.
Totally.
I don't know what their whole thing is, or why any of the fans of these things find any of it appealing. I can't imagine that there are people who are like, man, I just had a rough day at work. I just want to throw on some Seb Gorka for a bit. And just just release all that built up stuff and just get some Gorka. I don't understand any of it.
That line. I don't understand that line. Get some Gorka? No. How about not? Ugh. I'm not interested. Oh. All right. Well, let's move on to the GOP and their fears that maybe Donald Trump doesn't have the best political instincts. I love it. So, all right. So Sean Parnell, who was a candidate for a Senate seat in Pennsylvania, was endorsed by Donald Trump before he decided to drop out of the race. And now people are questioning, maybe Donald Trump doesn't have the best political instincts. So the latest development has to do with a pretty messy sounding divorce that Parnell has gone through. Parnell, who emerged as the leading Republican candidate, writes The Hill, in the race to succeed a retiring Senator Pat Toomey, after winning an early endorsement from Trump, made the decision to suspend his campaign on Monday after a judge ruled that his estranged wife should get primary custody of their 3 children in a case in which she accused him of physical and verbal abuse. So apologies, they are not officially divorced yet, but they are estranged. Parnell has vehemently denied the allegations, but nonetheless, he has decided to drop out of the race because those are the kinds of accusations that don't bode too well for candidates, even Republican candidates, believe it or not. So controversies around him raise questions about Trump's political instincts as well. As one Republican strategist said this, Trump's got no strategy. He's got no plans. He just wants to punish his enemies and reward his most loyal sycophants. He doesn't really have anything positive to say. It's all nonstop negativity and trying to assert control over a political party that's not really that controllable. And I think it's getting worse by the day. And one Pennsylvania Republican who did not want to go on the record, so he anonymously provided this statement to The Hill, said, "I think the people around him led him to believe that Sean was the best candidate, but he had every opportunity to pull back. He had a million off-ramps, and he didn't take any of them." And to be clear, that doesn't really surprise me. I'd be shocked if it surprises anyone in the GOP. But John, what do you think?
Yeah, we all know who he is. Like I saw he had done some interview. Trump had done some interview in the past day or two. And he said, he was like insulting Mark Zuckerberg and saying that when he was president, Mark Zuckerberg used to come to the White House and kiss his ass. And the reason he's telling that anecdote is to make Mark Zuckerberg look bad, which sure it does. It's like you've got more than enough reasons to not like Mark Zuckerberg, but he doesn't get that makes him look bad too. People did that because they knew that it worked. They knew that he was desperate for it. It says as much or more about Trump as it does about any of the individual people that went and sucked up to him. And so he seems to identify that happened with Mark Zuckerberg, but he doesn't get that that's the entirety of how he chooses candidates to endorse. Like he'd been convinced he was the best candidate. How? Based on what? He sat down and talked policy with him. Laid out the legislative agenda that this Senate Republican would put. No, he was the most fawning. Maybe there was a component of he'd raised a bunch of money. He respects that to some extent. But no, it's just the people who suck up to him. It's totally substance free. And the sort of people who are going to really suck up effectively to Trump are not necessarily the people who have the cleanest, most wholesome backgrounds. I mean, Sean Parnell, like this has been going around for a while. Did you covered his comments previously, stuff he said about women, Sean Parnell, like long before this race?
Actually, no, we haven't. So if you wanted to jump in with that, that'd be great.
I'll read a couple of quick ones. Like this
Sure.
is stuff that he could have known about. This is back in 2019. He said the idea that that a woman doesn't need a man to be successful is nonsense. The idea that a woman can live a happy and fulfilling life without a man, I think it's all nonsense. I think this idea of whole happy wife, happy life nonsense has done nothing but raise one generation of women tyrants after the next.
He sounds like an incredible partner, really.
Oh, he's great. He's probably great.
Sounds like
yeah, and none of that proves that he was abusive or that he tried to strangle her or told her to get out of the car and go get an abortion or whatever. But it's not 100% inconsistent with a guy that would potentially do stuff like that. There were other warning signs, and Trump just doesn't care. He's lazy, stupid, and doesn't care.
I mean, that's what Republican operatives are saying, right? The fact that when some of these accusations had already been uncovered, Trump had an opportunity to step back, but instead he would double down. And, as I look at the images and the B-roll of Parnell, I can't help but also think about the other factor that tends to persuade Trump in supporting a candidate or appointing certain people to his administration. And that is, oh, is this person telegenic? Is this person out of central casting? I mean, you get what I'm saying?
I thought you were going to say, does his hair in a pinch function as a hard hat? I mean,
he's into that too, don't get me wrong. But, here's a guy who, he looks young. He's got a full head of hair. I'm sure those are the kinds of, like, Donald Trump is an insanely shallow thinker, right? Just shallow person and a shallow thinker. So by the way, this is not me saying that Parnell, I think Parnell's a good looking guy. I'm not even thinking about that. But I am thinking in terms of how Trump perceives other people, right?
Sure.
And so I'm sure that factor, because other than that, you're right, John. What were the other determining factors for Donald Trump to endorse this guy? And I just love how now at this late date, you have these like genius GOP operatives who are like, turns out that maybe Trump doesn't have the best political instincts. Oh, wow. That's why they pay you guys the big bucks. Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah, and also, why should we rule out the possibility that Donald Trump, with all that we know he's been alleged to do by dozens and dozens of women, that he wouldn't feel some sort of kinship for men who had similarly made it through their life abusing women in a variety of different forms? Like, why are we not supposed to think that? Trump does it. You think it's beneath him to like other men who've gotten away with it too? And honestly, it's hardly speculation at this point. Like he didn't unendorse Sean Parnell. You've got stats. You've got other people that are facing accusations. What I do know is yesterday, Max Miller, he doubled down and endorsed him again. He's known since way back in his presidency that guy had abused in a variety of different forms Stephanie Grisham. This week, immediately following another one of their alleged abusive candidates stepping down, he apparently seemed to think, well, I gotta show that I still support the abusers. Which one do we got? Herschel Walker, I'll get to him next week. No, Max Miller. He's our guy. That guy is alleged to be an abuser.
I mean, and we all remember what happened in the Senate race in Alabama and how he continued to double down in his endorsement and support for Roy Moore. And so, yeah, I mean, he's got a long history of doing this.
Felt a different kinship with Roy Moore, but yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, none of this really surprises me. But what I do see happening, I don't think that it's going to work, but I do see the Republican Party attempting to distance itself in some ways from Donald Trump. And so, you have some lawmakers trying to like straddle both sides, like let's say Kevin McCarthy. Republicans are expecting to take control of the House, which means that he would have the opportunity to be the House Speaker. And if Donald Trump gets elected in 2024, and not only in 2024, even after the midterms, there's some thought that Kevin McCarthy would need the support of Donald Trump in order to get other lawmakers to sign on in voting in favor of McCarthy becoming the next Speaker of the House, which, Jesus Christ, that is...
I think that's the most 100% true thing imaginable. If Trump said he preferred someone else, McCarthy wouldn't be the guy.
Yeah. So you still have people sucking up to him, but then you have this other strategy of, there's definitely money behind Chris Christie coming out all of a sudden to criticize Trump. And you could tell it's an orchestrated effort. I don't know all the details of how that's working or why it's happening. But if the Republican Party thinks that they can sick Chris Christie on Trump and that'll somehow destroy Trump's political future, I don't know. Were they asleep over the last 5-6 years? It feels.
We saw the debates. How did that work last time in 2016?
Not so good. Pretty humiliating for Chris Christie. All right. Well, we got to take a break. When we come back, we've got more news for you, including something you should really be concerned about: alien reptile sex.
I'm old enough that I remember when Captain Crunch put the berries in there.
Yay, crunch berries!
And I was like, ooh, the fake berries.
Remember?
We're gonna try that.
We did a story back in the day about how a woman sued, General Mills.
She'd been eating it for 4 years, believing that it was actual berries.
Yeah. She's like, these aren't real berries at all. Yeah. I'm like, I got news for you. Captain Crunch isn't really a captain or a person. Joining me now, legendary whistleblower and American hero, Edward Snowden. First question is, hey, where are you?
I'm in my apartment in Moscow.
All of a sudden, in the studio, Jim Gaffigan, everybody.
Mental illness is, completely undiagnosed in our society.
It's not about a particular administration. It's about a broken system of power, and through that, really, the instrumentalization of a system of not justice, but injustice.
People understand whether they claim to deny climate change or not. Our collective house is in crisis. We're also dealing with the legacy of 40 years of economic policies that have made people's lives more precarious.
Sometimes you got to force people into their humanity. Sometimes you have to shake people into empathy.
Senator Elizabeth Warren joins us in the studio.
Healthcare is a basic human right, and we are fighting for basic human rights.
In order to actually achieve that vision of everyone having access to the same resources and getting to determine the outcome of their life, we have a lot of work to do, and it needs to start right now.
Here's something you may not know. When you deposit your money in a big bank, it doesn't just sit, safe and secure, in a vault. Instead, your money could end up building oil pipelines, mining for coal, or drilling in the Arctic. So if you're concerned about the planet, give your money something good to do. Make the move to green with Aspiration's fossil fuel-free account and join the thousands each week who are switching to save their dollars and save the planet at the same time.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Idarola. This is gonna be a big one.
What Donald Trump has done as president has cut taxes for the wealthy and made life better for rich people. But he's made life worse for poor people.
We're making America great again by throwing more money at the military to destroy other countries because that makes us great instead of investing it in ourselves.
That it's Donald Trump and it's Stephen Miller. The choosing is based on wanting to create cruel and inhumane conditions to scare other people away from ever coming to the United States.
The opportunity to make money off of tragedy is the American way.
There is only one place to put garbage people: in the trash.
We've never had so much access to so much information with so little idea of what the hell is going on.
What does enforcing our borders have to do with traumatizing children? Absolutely nothing.
I think a sane person could say the current situation we have right now is radical. But what we're doing is literally making the world more like hell. That's a warning sign.
ShopTYT.com now has books. One of them is Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People. That's a saying that AOC said, they've got money, we've got people. It's the best tracing of the AOC victory I have seen anywhere. It's the most accurate, and it's got great details. The book actually goes all the way back to Jesse Jackson and how he was the original Bernie Sanders. If you want to know how we're going to win going forward, those lessons are super important, and they're in Ryan's book. So check it out right now at ShopTYT.com.
We found the perfect person to lead the army, Allison Hartson.
The establishment media works hand in glove with our corporate legislators, and our corporate legislators work hand in glove with the corporation. And we're going to make it so that it's a decentralized force throughout the country so that we can quickly identify stories, quickly identify troll farms, and go in and neutralize the enemy, and then start building responsible media throughout the country and on every platform available.
Welcome back to TYT. Special thanks to all the super chats. I'm going to do a quick lightning fire round of reading some of these super chats, starting with Covered in Cake, who says Kyle Rittenhouse was flashing an exaggerated OK sign while standing beside a Proud Boy who simultaneously flashed the white supremacy hand sign that looks exactly the same. Unfortunate coincidence. Totally hear what you're saying. LJ Wombology, thank you for writing in. Haven't heard from you in a while. I just want to say that green bean casserole looks like dog puke. Keep on keeping on, TYT, and my green bean casserole hating comrades. Love it. Elsa writes in and says, thankful for TYT. We're so thankful for you guys. Thank you for the support, especially during the rough times when I feel like everything's kind of caving in. You guys really keep us going. Join TYT during the 2020 election. Joined during the 2020 election, started my medicine residency in early COVID, was distraught with the nothing as people struggled. You calling out the BS crumbs validated me and gave me hope. That makes me really happy. Thank you so much for watching, Elsa. Ray Turner, AKA the Bearded Dragon, says more than 33 migrants drowned in the English Channel today. The UK government wept crocodile tears, but saying they should have stayed in France. We know exactly what that rhetoric is like here in the United States, especially during the Syrian refugee crisis. It's just horrific. It's really, really hard not to have a negative, skewed image of humanity. But good people exist. We got to remember that. And we got to keep calling out the bad guys and to basically push for a better world. Specific Gravity says, if Biden stopped immigration 100%, they'd complain that one onion costs $12.99 because no one is here to pick the fields, then blame Biden for it too. And by the way, Biden's immigration policies have been a disaster. It's just a continuation of Trump's garbage. And he's getting no credit for that from the right wing. In fact, the right wing is twisting it, and making it seem like he has an open border policy, which is ridiculous. And finally, MS Doll 13 says, I've always hated Thanksgiving, hated the white people bland food, and hated the BS propaganda. But today I'm thankful for a bit of justice and very thankful for the TYT community. Feels like I'm not alone. We thank you for you as well. And look, I have decided to, Thanksgiving, obviously, like it originates from not a great tradition. So I totally hear you on that. But I try to also focus on the gratitude element of it. And yeah, I'm super thankful for all of you guys and thankful for you, John. I love doing the show with you on Wednesdays, and you bust your butt to make it happen. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and you can like the holiday without any. Like, I don't believe in ghosts. I dress up sometimes on Halloween. I think the whole Jesus stuff is all like made up. Like, do you? But it's made up. I still love Christmas. Like, you don't have to. We just like eating food and giving each other things. That's pretty much all it is.
Yeah, I love getting together with my family in one place and sharing a meal with them. So I think about it that way.
I like the 4th of July and America is the great Satan. These are not inconsistent things to believe. That's all I'm saying.
Yep. Well, let's talk a little bit about reptile sex, because, that's what religious people are doing today. I know, right?
Yes.
So I love it. It's so good. Okay, so religious author and end times preacher Sharon Gilbert went on Pastor Jim Bakker's show, so it's going to be good, for a segment titled The Great Delusion, a fitting title for what we're about to watch, in which Gilbert tries to claim that an alien creature impersonating her husband tried to have sex with her. I'm not even kidding. We have the receipts, people. Let's watch.
After Derek and I got married, one night, this other Derek appears in our bed. The real Derek is lying down next to me. Other Derek sits right up out of him. It startled me. I knew that was not Derek. And so I asked this critter, who are you? Because he clearly wanted to have sexual relations. And he said, come on, I'm your husband. I said, who are you? And he had the nerve to claim to be Ahasuerus, Xerxes. Well, other Derek seriously wanted to invite me to use my free will to do something that was going to pull me away from God.
That was amazing. I've always wondered, how do these televangelists manage to draw an audience, right? Like, you got Pat Robertson. I can't believe he's still alive. I mean, it's amazing. Like, who tunes in? Like, how do they sustain this whole televised situation? And now I get it. Like, they bring in women to talk about their fantasies.
Sure. Well, it's
in the context of like, oh, this was very naughty and bad, and I didn't like it at all. But let me tell you about my alien fantasy.
Totally. And look, they're gonna have some kind of audience. I mean, have you ever seen on like a TV show when like they discover that someone has died and they only know because a couple weeks have gone by and the smell is starting to drift out? Well, when they go in, sometimes the TV is on. That's like days of free tuning into these sorts of things. But anyway, like it's more interesting than a lot of stuff. Her talking about her weird fantasy that I think she had after watching 300 and then experiencing sleep paralysis. The spin that she put on it was pretty hot.
No, I'm super into it. Like, I want to know more. I want to know more.
Have you ever like woken up in the middle of the night and some critter, you could tell, like, you looked at the critter and you're like, that critter wants to have sexual relations?
Unfortunately, no. There's been nothing like that
critters?
in my life. No.
Well.
But I do want to hear more from her story, which we will in just a second. But we have to take another look at the best reaction to her story. Let's go.
Because he clearly wanted to have sexual relations.
Oh my God.
Okay, tell me more. Look at his face. Oh, okay.
I love that he looked kind of demonic when he did that, actually.
His eyebrows hit the ceiling. He was like, didn't see her going in that direction.
But like, it's not like she is the crazy on the panel. I mean, they're all there for that stuff. Dude, don't judge her for her contribution.
I don't think she's crazy.
You're supposed to be yes-anding in this sort of apocalyptic improv that you've got going on. You were like yucking her yum about the reptile sex.
What is that statement you just said? What was that? Do people say that?
Yeah, they do sometimes. Well, I heard it. It was from a guy that like he sat up from my wife in the middle of the night and then he used that expression. And I could tell that he wanted to compare colloquial expressions. I could tell just by looking at him. Anyway, no, it's just, look, I feel, are we supposed to feel bad?
No. What do you mean are we supposed to feel bad?
Well, because there's a lot of...
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
I am entertained. But like, is she experiencing issues that would be better treated? Or is she a fully conscious or at least moderately sentient person who's participating in a massive grift of old people and they're just trying to get a little cut of their Social Security checks? I don't know.
I would go with column B for sure. So no, I don't feel bad for her. And I'm like honestly highly entertained. At least, look, if they're going to engage in grifting, which they are going to do, they might as well provide entertainment. And this is highly, highly entertaining. In fact, she goes into more detail in the next clip. Let's watch.
So this last time, I knew he was really desperate. And I asked him again, who are you? He told me the same answer. And I said, I am not going with you. This was an internal dialogue. Finally, I said, I've had enough in my mind. I reached up. I grabbed his face. And I said, you are a liar. And Jesus is real. And I pulled that face off. And beneath it was a reptile.
She grabbed him. She grabbed him.
Pulled him right off.
Pulled him right off.
Look, there is a small chance that she is one of many people in America who has issues and has not received the support that she needs. So a lot of people don't have the financial means, and we've done nothing as a country to make it financially feasible. She's doing fine in terms of money. There's a small chance of that. If that's the case, I feel bad.
John, why
I try to be fair
right now? John, she does not have mental health issues.
She's a massive grifter. She's a
massive grifter. She's an end times preacher. Okay, she exploits religious individuals' worst fears to make money.
Well, but to be fair, like you said, she's an end times preacher, but she is trying to entertain us. So if the end does have to come, she's making sure it's a happy ending.
Exactly. I don't feel bad for her at all, not even a little bit. So don't take this away from me, John. Okay. How dare you?
You can have Xerxes, okay? That critter is all yours, Anna Kasparian.
But look, this is a really fascinating look into the mind of a right-wing religious grifter, because she's making all of this up. And I just feel like in order to make this stuff up, there has to be some element of fantasy in it. Like there's a little bit more. One more real quick clip.
Okay.
And he had little creatures with him this time. He brought these little halfling creatures, and they looked like, I don't know, gargoyles. They were very reptilian as well. So beneath that face of Derek was a reptilian serpentine creature, probably similar to what was visiting the Anasazi.
Wow.
cool. Like, she's into orgies. That's totally fine. No one's judging her for that. And so she just wants to talk about it, but do it with the cover of I'm a sweet old religious lady who, you know, is just really concerned about reptiles and stuff. But let me tell you about this crazy orgy I had.
I found it to be a little bit, again, like I've never done improv, but I believe that there's supposed to be a welcoming, accepting environment. And when she finishes her whole thing about how she narrowly was avoided being impregnated by a reptile Xerxes from space, as soon as she finished talking, they were like, yeah, and it's like, no, you come on, like, show some respect to her story that she came up with or dreamed or got high or whatever. I don't know, I thought that to be disrespectful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, she's a very accomplished woman. She's written many, many books, Giants, Gods, and Dragons, exposing the fallen realm and the plot to ignite the final war of the ages. Veneration.
She's lived the life I wish I'd lived, actually, with those book titles.
Oh, John. That's why
And
you
the
have
dream.
some sympathy for the poor woman, right?
Maybe.
That's why.
Maybe. Oh, I want to read
All right.
this.
Well, there's a list for you guys if you guys are, you know, looking for some light reading over the holiday break. So definitely check that out if you're interested. For everyone else, though, I am signing off, but there's going to be a great bonus episode with John Idarola and Brett Ehrlich. Do not miss it. TYT.com/join to become a member. Happy Thanksgiving. See you soon.